With our next guest, we're going to learn how small businesses will play a vital role in our acquisition innovations. Let's welcome Brent Maraviglia of the U.S. Digital Service. Hey Brent, thanks for taking time to join us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at the USDS?
Sure. I have a procurement background here, about 10 years within government, and I'm now at U.S. Digital Service.
For viewers who aren't familiar with the USDS, can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, great question. We are a tech startup within the White House, and we bring in technologists from the commercial space and we send them into very specific agencies to work on specific tech problems, and they're applying those commercial practices that are common in the marketplace, like iterative software development and user-centered design, to solve problems to make tech better for our citizens.
Very good. How does procurement, though, fit into the U.S. Digital Service?
Yeah, thanks, John. And if you don't mind, I brought some notes with me today as well. So those teams that we send into the agencies, they can really only work on so many projects. After all, we were only about 200 people strong. But to solve IT in government in the long term, the long play, as we say, is government contracts. So most of the work, IT work in government, is done through contracts. And if you wouldn't believe it, but we actually spend about $86 billion with a B per year on IT. And then within that kind of pie chart of $86 billion, 75% of that spend annually is going to operations and maintenance. That is really just maintaining really old systems. I'm talking about some of them decades old, and they're not adding any new functionality. But we would argue that our citizens deserve better. They deserve IT to work for them like their commercial products do. So think about all the apps that you have on your smartphone and how well they work. Government IT should be able to work just as well for our citizens. So think about, for example, when you order a book off Amazon. It's easy. It's actually a pleasure to use. Government IT should be the same way.
So how well is the federal government recognizing this need?
Yeah, so we're recognizing it more and more. And for those that are recognizing the need, they really do want to get started. But there's a lot of question marks about that because we're kind of new to doing IT the way it's done in the commercial world. And there are some projects that really need to get fixed fast. So there's that question of how do we get started fast?
Great. And I've heard for quite a while that the IT procurement process takes too long a time, that tech innovations come too quickly. Isn't that problematic?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So I was a IT contracting officer in several agencies, most recently at the EPA, where I led a team of contracting officers. And I can't tell you how many times I got the complaint, contracts takes too long. It might take a year or two for us to get a significant acquisition done. Even writing the requirement can take quite a bit of time. So the good thing is that there's a lot of really good companies that can provide digital services to the government, both large and small. And we especially want to see companies that are exemplary in some of the digital service playbook. For instance, play number one, understand what people need. So not building a system and in a locked up office in a federal agency and not instead going out and talking with end users and building products accordingly. Play number four in the digital services playbook, build the service using agile and iterative practices. Or play number 8, choose a modern technology stack. Or play number 10, automate testing and deployments. So the good thing when you talk about speed, one good option is what the Small Business Administration has come up with, and it's called the 8A program. What the 8A program is, it's a socioeconomic program where you can award up to $4 million each, sole source. So that's a really good thing. But with that comes a catch as well. So you're actually, once the requirement goes into the 8A program, you have to receive approval from the SBA to get it out of the 8A program once the contract is done. So for that reason, unfortunately, a lot of agencies shy away from using the 8A program because they think that they're kind of locked in indefinitely.
So what kind of solution has the USDS developed to address that situation?
Yeah, so the U.S. Digital Service and with the Small Business Administration, we partnered together and to create what we call the 8A Program Digital Service Initiative, or we also call it the 8A Digital Service Initiative. And what this allows for, it gives this kind of clear, easy, fast path for agencies to get started with digital services. It increases the amount of awards given to quality 8A providers, and it reduces the administration for both the SBA and at the agency side. But here's the kicker, this is the real important thing, is that the agency can be released from the 8A program once the contract is done. So whereas before or normally you would have to get approval from the SBA, that approval is not needed here. So an agency can do their market research, find a great 8A that's good at digital services, get started with digital services very quickly, and then be released from the 8A program should they choose to once the work is done.
Well, let's go back a bit. What's considered within scope?
Yeah, so this initiative is not for everything. There are 3 statements of objectives that we've created along with the SBA that creates the scope. They're learn the process. The second one is select the tech. And the third one is build the minimum viable product, or MVP. So I'm going to go ahead and refer to some slides that I brought along with me. First is learn the process. So what this is talking about is very much about culture change, practical application, and a retrospective. So first is the coaching. So coaching is provided to teach kind of those digital service concepts as such as hypothesis development and testing those hypotheses, product vision, statement development, discovery and user research, product roadmaps, design, agile delivery techniques and methods, understanding end user needs, product management, automated testing and continuous integration, which is another word for DevOps. Also, there's this practical application. So it's not just teaching what it is, but trying to apply it to a specific need within the agency. So they're going to work with the agency to help develop a lightweight prototype or pilot of a system to start mitigating and identify the agency problem. So this would include creating a product vision, the product roadmap, writing epics and user stories, and leveraging user-centered design. It also includes iteration retrospectives, release planning, testing solutions with actual end users, and tracking success using metrics. The last part of this learn the process is a retrospective where they look back on all the work that was done within scope for the contract and noting kind of what went well, what didn't go well, and planning for next steps. So that's learn the process. The next one is select the technology. This is typically what something that we would call in U.S. Digital Service as a discovery sprint, where we're sent into an agency. The agency maybe wants to, I don't know, say, move to the cloud as much as possible, or select a more commercial communications platform so they can communicate with the public faster and more efficiently. Or they want to move to a more common CRM. There's a number of different platforms that are available, that are out there in the commercial space, but the government may not have as in-depth knowledge as they should. So you could see this as really intense market research to determine which platform is best for the agency And the vendor will kind of has that knowledge and can apply that to the agency's specific technology environment, kind of taking a look underneath their hood to find out, okay, since you have this technical environment, this tech stack, there are these common platforms out there in the commercial world. Here's the very specific pros and cons for each of those platforms. So at the end, also included within this statements of objectives, is kind of taking the maybe 2 or 3 best alternatives, buying, if that means like some licenses, and putting those in an environment where the agency can kind of put them in front of end users and try them out before making a final determination on which platform or which technology stack is going to work best for them. So usually the government will make that decision, and after they send out a very big request for quote, and they leave it to the vendors to propose which platforms they think would work best. Well, that's fine. The agency might have a better understanding of what technology only at that time works best. But there might be other parts of the quote that aren't really best for the government. But now the government is stuck with that vendor, even though they presented the right platform, but there are other parts of the proposal that won't work well for the government. This kind of takes that out of the equation and helps the government to make a better assessment up front. Last SOO, or the statements of objective, is to build a minimum viable product. So what this is about is discovery and design, developing an actual minimum viable product, and a retrospective. So there's a significant amount of time given to discovery and design, where the government and the vendor find an agency problem and end user goals. They create a hypothesis statement or statements that can be tested by releasing a minimum viable product. So in other words, a product that has all the needs of what the thing should do, but not necessarily all the wants. And then create a product vision. And then the next step is actually developing a minimum viable product, which includes using agile software development methods to build an MVP and release it to the end users to understand what their whole experience is with that product. So there's going to be this great focus on addressing the whole experience from start to finish for the end users, making the product simple and intuitive, and only making decisions based upon data, measuring how well the product is working for those users. And then last, again, there's the retrospective, which includes a detailed look back at the project, identifying past and potential future roadblocks, and updating the product roadmap for really scaling that MVP through continuous design and agile processes.
Fantastic. Well, if that's within scope, what's not in scope?
Yeah, so really what is in scope is everything up to building a minimum viable product, but what would not be in scope is anything thereafter. So full system development would, for example, not be within scope.
Reasonable enough. Well, when will the 8A program for digital services be available to federal contracting officers?
Yeah, so many people don't know this, but it's live now. And the SBA has signed the memo. It's available on our TechFAR Hub, which you'll probably see on the screen right now.
Oh, great. So the 8A program for digital services is live and active, but I understand that the USDS has something else that you're working on to help match up agencies with great vendors. Can you tell us a little more about this? Yeah,
so that's a really good question, because as I started training and going out to agencies, talking to agencies about what this digital service initiative is, they all said, great, Brent, that is awesome, but how do we know what a good digital services vendor looks like? The U.S. Digital Service partnered with OFCIO, also within the White House, and the CIO Council, which is in GSA. And we are working on what we're calling a matchmaking event, kind of like dating for the government and private industry, right? So I brought a few slides with me today, or some graphics. And So like I said, the federal government really likes this idea of this initiative. They see it as a great way to get started with digital services. But as they look at all the 8As out there, which there are hundreds of, they start thinking to themselves, okay, which one should I partner with? How do I know that they're really good at digital services? So the good thing is that there's been a lot of market research that's been done to identify really good 8A digital service providers. And we've seen their work done in making really good, cutting-edge, kind of commercial-grade products that are deployed in government and serving citizens today. So they actually have contracts. So we know of plenty of vendors that are really doing great work. So what if one day we brought together some of these great vendors that we already know about on one side, and then we also brought together agencies that had specific requirements that fit within one of these, or together some of these statements of objectives. It doesn't need to be fit necessarily in one SOO. They could combine or mix and match. But if we were to bring them together for a meeting. So imagine this. You bring together in one conference room, the federal government with their requirement that is within scope, and they sit at one end of the table. And at the other side of the table walks in an 8A vendor that's kind of pre-vetted. We know that they do good work. And maybe 2 weeks ahead of time, the agency has given that statements of objectives, their tailored SOO, to the vendor so they can kind of study ahead of time and be prepared to kind of make their pitch maybe over an hour long.
But this isn't a procurement action, correct? This is just within the 8A program?
Yeah, this is the beauty of the 8A program, is no protest risk. As you can see, if you want to look up in FAR 19.8, you can kind of work directly with vendors without the risk of protest. So really, this is not oral presentations. These are not oral quotes. This is just really good market research. Wow. Yeah. So imagine, one side of the table you have the agency, the other side you have the 8A vendor, and so say they make a 1 hour pitch. Maybe even there's a lightweight prototype that they've brought, or a previous project or IT thing or application that they've made that is somewhat similar to the government's needs. So imagine the hour's over, the 8A vendor walks out, the government kind of deliberates for 15, 20 minutes, and let's say 10:30, a different 8A vendor comes in that again has seen the scope, they've received it 2 weeks ahead of time, and they give their own pitch. And then the vendor kind of walks out, again the government deliberates, everybody breaks for lunch. The whole process takes place again for a third round after lunch. And again, this doesn't need to be just one vendor. Imagine like that's just one conference room, but simultaneously there's 2 other conference rooms, maybe on a different floor, that is Agency B and Agency C, and throughout the day, they've also met with different 8A digital service vendors.
Oh, so different teams, different needs, but the same matching event?
That's right. That's right. So the plan would be that at the end of the day, each of these agencies, let's say maybe there's 3 agencies, they have each met with 3 digital service vendors that have been pre-vetted, and they have these agencies have a much better idea of who they want to go into contract with. So much that they could be thinking, okay, the first vendor was pretty good, but not the best. The second vendor was almost there, but not as good as the third vendor. We want to engage that third vendor later this week, ask for or send to them a request for proposal. We're going to be able to move pretty quickly here through RFP, receiving a proposal, a technical evaluation, negotiations, and awards. I mean, that could be done literally between the matching event and award within 2 or 3 weeks.
So going back though to the matching event, it's still considered information gathering, right? After you've gathered information for these events, now you hold the formal procurement, correct?
You've got it exactly right. So you know enough, and you can explain now that you can go and teach all the agencies for me.
Well, we'll see about that. I'm sure our viewers will be on the lookout for that. Say, can they contact you if they want to participate in these matching events?
Yes, that would be great. We are reaching out now and having kind of informal conversations with agencies, trying to find requirements, explaining what this initiative is and the matching event, to find an agency that has a burning need and they want to get started with digital services, and they could use help just like this, where we kind of facilitate something where we help them get some really good market research done so they can move quickly through the procurement process and get started with digital services. Even the end of this fiscal year, FY17 or the beginning of FY18.
Well, thank you, Brent, for being here today and helping our viewers understand how to get started with the 8A program.
Thanks for having me.